How do I get all of this gear to control Cakewalk? Let's find out in this video. Wait for it. Hi folks, I'm Mike and I hope you're well. So I've got 5 devices here which I'm using to control Cakewalk. I've got 3 on my desktop, I've got my keyboard here, and I'm also using my humble smartphone as well. Now if you've got a device that you can't see here and you want to use it to control Cakewalk, do stick around because this video may still be very helpful to you. The reason for that is many manufacturers use a common protocol to communicate with doors. So protocols are kind of a language, a way of communication. That protocol is called the Mackie MCU protocol, and it can do things like control transport, things like play, stop, fast forward, that kind of thing. So for example, with my keyboard here, it's got some transport buttons, so I can use it to start the playback, so like this, and stop. Fast forward, record, all of that kind of good stuff. I can do it here on my Mackie MCU controller. I can do it over here on my IOSTATION Pro Q controller. And also over here on this Presonus IOSTATION 24, which is actually very similar to the Presonus fader port as well. So I can play, stop, fast forward, all that good stuff. So that's the first kind of group of functions that we're using to control Cakewalk. The other one is to do with individual channels or multiple channels, things like muting, soloing, that kind of thing. And what a lot of us want to do is control the faders. So for example, on my keyboard again here, I can use the fader here, push it up and down, and you can see the faders going up and down on these other devices. And if you're eagle-eyed, you'll be able to see it happening on the screen behind as well. So of course I can do that with these controllers and with my fader port over here. Not fader port, sorry, the IOSTATION 24. I always think it's the fader port with an audio interface added to it. Anyway, so those are the things that we can do. There's a whole bunch of other things you can do. With some devices you can get plug-in control, all of that kind of good stuff as well. Lots of advantages. It feels a lot more organic to do it this way. You can put your hands on something and use it rather than having to use the mouse and keyboard all the time. So I know some of you do have problems getting this up and running. So in today's video I'm going to run through how to set it up and then how to fix some of those common issues. Let's start off with some preparation. So what I mean by preparation is making sure that your device is in Mackie MCU mode. Now, unfortunately, I can't tell you exactly how to do that. It varies from one manufacturer to the other and from one device to the other. The tips I'll give are this. If you've got a screen on the device and it's got some settings, then often you'll find that you can switch modes in there. If you haven't got a screen on your device, then commonly there's a special button combination you have to press when you power up the device to get it into Mackie MCU mode. What I suggest you do is go to that product's web page, look for the manual, and that's usually a PDF, and do a search in that PDF for MCU. And if you can't find it at all, that may mean that your device doesn't have MCU mode. Another thing you can do though is look for any tips on setting it up for Cubase. I've often found that helpful because Cubase uses MCU as well. So if there isn't something on Cakewalk specifically or Sonar, then look for Cubase. Maybe you'll get the tips in there as to how to put your device in the correct mode. Once you've got it in Mackie MCU mode, then we can start setting it up in Cakewalk. So I'm going to start off with the standard process. This is the process you'll have to go through regardless of manufacturer or model of device. Now I'll happen to be using my Mackie MCU Pro control surface, the device where the protocol gets its name from. But as I say, this could apply to something like the Behringer X-Touch, or as I say, my QCON Pro G2, and many other devices, keyboards and things from other manufacturers. So I'm in Cakewalk. I'm going to press P on the keyboard to bring up preferences. And then I'm going to go down to MIDI devices, because all of these devices are going to use MIDI to communicate with the computer and then with Cakewalk. So it's important that we set up inputs and outputs. The inputs are so that the device can tell Cakewalk to do things, and the outputs are so that Cakewalk can tell the device what the current state is, whether it's playing, what position it's at, what the current state of a fader is, all that kind of good stuff. So you can see I've already got a device selected here. This is just my keyboard, my regular keyboard set up for playing notes, okay? That's not what I'm interested in at the moment. I'm going to set up my MCU Pro. So I'll set its input on and I'll set its output on. Okay, now a note on keyboards, if I was setting this up at the moment to be using the controls on my keyboard, the transport controls and the faders and things, usually what happens, in fact all of the times that I've done this successfully, this has happened, that keyboard will have two MIDI outputs and inputs, one for its regular use for keyboards and things, and then another one for using the Mackie MCU protocol. It may have more than that, so depending on the device it may be using MIDI 2 or 3, etc. So in my case with my ARTURIA keyboard, you can see here it's got this device here, MIDI into KEYLAB Mark II. That's the ARTURIA device. So if I was setting that up, that's the one that I would be enabling, and it's the one that I would use later on in this process. But I'm not doing that now, so I'm going to stick to this MCU Pro here. So I've got that selected. I could hit on apply at the moment if I wanted to make sure that's applied, and then I need to go down to MIDI control surfaces. I click on that and now I'm ready to set up this as a control surface. So I'll go right up to the top right hand corner here, this sort of little icon here, and you can see it's to add a new controller surface. I'll click on that. That brings up this dialog here. So I'll start off by selecting under here the Mackie control selection there. You may have a bunch of other ones there, you may have less than this, depends on your particular setup, but you will all have the Mackie control. I think it's a driver you would call it here. So I'll select that as the type of control surface, and then I need to select that device that I just enabled for the input and the output. So I'm not going to use the KEYLAB, that's for my notes. I'm using the MCU Pro on this occasion. So change that to whatever your device is for that particular MIDI output for that device. Then I just click on OK, and that is all set up. Now, if everything goes well and the device is sort of using the standard implementation, then that will all be working. I'll just click on apply here just to make sure. I'll close that. And if I hit play on my Mackie, you can see and hear that the music starts to play, and I'll click stop and that stops. And if I move one of the faders around, in actual fact I'll just bring this over so you can see the faders I've got control over. You can see I'm moving them up and down. So that has all worked well, all gone to plan, but it doesn't always go to plan. So let's look at the first reason why that might not be the case. So sometimes you'll follow that procedure and still nothing happens. Well, I've got a quick tip for you here, and this may solve it for you. Let me know in the comments down below if it does, and also let me know which model of keyboard you're using, so that if somebody else comes to me with that model, I can let them know this is how you can fix it. I'm using my ARTURIA keyboard here. I've set it up as I did in the previous section. I've made sure I've used the right MIDI outputs and things. I've gone through and set it up as a Mackie controller, and then I've gone to hit the play button on the transport. I'll do it now. Nothing is happening. I'm pushing the faders around on my keyboard. None of the faders are moving. So here's how I'm going to fix that. Whenever you've set up a Mackie control surface of any kind, if you go up to this utilities menu at the top left here, click on that, you'll see at the bottom it will appear down here. It may have a slightly different name. If you've just got one installed, it will just say Mackie Control 1 like that. Click on that. Takes a moment, and then it brings up this menu. This gives you a few useful options as regards the control surface and sort of customizing it. The one thing I've found that really helps with a number of devices is checking this tick box here next to disable handshake. This is a process which happens normally between Cakewalk and the device when it first starts up. It sends some information back and forth, but with some devices they're not completely compliant, so this doesn't work and it won't get going. So if this is not happening for you, if it's not working, try this. Click on disable handshake, then click close that window there. Now I'm going to press play on my ARTURIA device. You can see things happening there. It's playing. I'll press stop. I'll push some of the faders around. You can see them moving in Cakewalk there. It's fixed that. It's not always a complete fix, but you'll generally find you get most of the functionality that you would want. Oh, by the way, are you finding this video useful? If you are, go ahead and hit the like button for me. Do it right away so that you don't forget. If you don't like this video at all, make sure you hit the dislike button. twice. If you do like this kind of content, make sure you subscribe and ring the bell on YouTube so that you're notified about other videos. Now, back to this video. So sometimes you'll get issues when you've got more than one device set up to try and control Cakewalk. Sometimes the second device just won't work or doesn't work fully. So for that, I'm going to give you a solution which involves downloading a file. I'll put a link for that in the description down below. And within that file is a setup. You just run that setup and install some alternative drivers which will appear in Cakewalk. You'll have to restart Cakewalk, of course, before you can see them. Now, I just want to quickly thank Noel Borthwick and Mark McLeod from BandLab, who have given me some little hints before I've proceeded in making this video, particularly surrounding this particular subject. So I've already got one controller set up. That's my IOSTATION QCON Pro G2, and I'm going to set up a second one. So again, I'll press P on the keyboard preferences. I'm already in control surfaces here, and you can see I've already got the icon set up just as normal as I've shown you already. So now I'm going to add my IOSTATION 24. That's the Presonus product, and I think that product works in exactly the same way as their current fader port as well. So you can follow this procedure if you're having that issue with that as well. So I'm going to go ahead on the icon at the top right there, click to add a new controller surface. Now, in this part where I select the controller surface, rather than picking Mackie control, I'm going to go ahead, and this has appeared now. This is something that Mark McLeod make from BandLab, and I've followed that process which I told you about earlier of installing that. So I'm going to select this one, this McLeod Mackie control number 1. And if I was going to do even more devices, then I'd use number 2 and number 3. So I'll click on number 1 there, and again I'll just go ahead and I'll select the IOSTATION 24C there. Again, IOSTATION 24C there. Click on OK, click on Apply, close this window. So I'm going to use my QCON to press play. You can see that's happening, and my fader's going up and down, and I can already see my fader moving on my IOSTATION from Presonus over there. You can see that moving up and down, and the transport controls are working on that as well. So that's how you would go ahead setting up a second or third device, etc. It may even help if you're just having general problems to try these alternative drivers. I can't guarantee, but there's always a possibility that could help. It's worth trying out. So if you're still confused, please do ask in the comments down below, and I'll do my very best to help you out. But do bear in mind, I don't know about every single device out there and how to get it into Mackie MCU mode. That's something you're best to look in the manual for, or contact that company support about. Now, if you want to download those other drivers I told you about, do check the links in the description. They may well help you out. While you're there, check out my link to patreon.com, where for as little as $1 per month you can help me help you by making more videos like this. And I'll see you in the next video.